Okay, in this video, I'd like to talk about Microsoft DHCP. I'd like to talk about why we would use DHCP and where that will come in handy. I'd also like to talk about the benefits of DHCP. And in this video, we're going to go through and we're going to install DHCP. We're going to also deploy the scopes and we're going to test DHCP. So back up at the top, why would we ever use DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol? The main reason for this is ease of management. So normally you would have to type the IP addresses into the network adapters like we've been doing in the past for like the domain controller or for our any of our member servers. Normally you'd have to come in here and type in the IP address. Where DHCP comes into play, we can actually ease that management by getting the MAC address of that computer. That's going to be the burned in address of the network adapter. That's the hardware address. We can take that and we can put that into the DHCP scope as a reservation, and then it will automatically assign the IP address to that server every time it restarts. So that's one thing we can do there. That's a benefit. Another reason we would do this is that if we had a bunch of computers, let's say when you sign on to your home network, like your wireless networks, your IP addresses are automatically given to your devices, such as your cell phones, your cameras, your printers, your computers, your TVs. Those things are dynamically assigned to the computer or the object itself on the network. That's where your DHCP is going to come into play, and it prevents you from having to go around your house and assign those IP addresses. Well, it's the same thing on our networks. We have users coming and going with laptops and phones and IP phones and desktops and laptops all day long. And so we'd be pretty busy as an administrator if we had to assign all of them a static IP address. So DHCP comes into play there to where we can go in here, configure a scope for each one of those types of items. So if we wanted a scope for phones, we needed a scope for printers, another scope for cell phones, computers, things of that nature. We can assign those to one group, or we can go ahead and put those into their own separate scopes. And we'll have a scope for each one of the networks as well. And so that's going to be what's called a VLAN, and it's going to be a virtual LAN address. And normally you'll work with your network administrator on that. And so the network administrator will say, hey, your computer is going to be part of these VLANs, these virtual LANs, has access to those. And then they're going to tell their routers and switches to actually point the desktops and laptops to your DHCP server. And that's how those clients will actually get a IP address. That's called a relay. And so they will assign a IP address to that. That's going to be the IP address of your server. So in their relay section, they'll put in the IP address of your DHCP server. From there, your server will give out the IP addresses to each one of the scopes that's been defined within it. Okay, I know that's a lot of talk there, but I do want to drive home what we're going to be doing here and the benefits of why we would actually utilize a DHCP server. And, just wanted to go through those things before we'll go through and configure it. Okay, all right, we're going to jump over there into our server and start configuring. Okay, here we are. We're over on one of our servers, and this is not a domain controller. This is one of the member servers within the AD environment of the test lab environment. So you can see here, we're on the test lab 01. It's not an AD server. We're going to go through and add a role to this server. So we're going to first go into go into our server manager, and as you can see here from tools, we don't have that that administrative management tool installed here. So next thing we're going to do here is click on add role and features, click on next here and go through our wizard, and you're going to see here it's going to be this server that we're configuring. We don't have another server here that we're doing. And from here you're going to go ahead and select your DHCP option. You're going to get your items that go along with it here. You go ahead and say add these features. You're going to select next. And from here, there are no other dependencies that need to go with it. If you can see down through here, if they were, they would have showed up on the first screen there. It gives an opportunity to install something else as well. So another feature as well. And I want to say, if you can look here on the side at the breadcrumbs, you can see that there was a difference here. One was a role. So this server plays a role keyword there of a DHCP server. And then a feature is going to be something that you want to install on here, like BitLocker or something like that. That's going to be a feature. There's not really a role. There's not a role for a BitLocker on the network. There is a feature on this server for BitLocker. It does something independent on this server, but when it needs to perform a holistic function, it's going to be here inside of a server role. There's going to be a role that the server plays. All right, click next here. Click on next again, and here we get the thing for if we need to restart. We're going to go ahead and say install, and we'll let this run, and we'll come back here. It's take about 5 minutes to finish, and we'll resume as soon as this is done. Okay, so now we can see that our installation is done. And just like before, when we installed Active Directory and any type of a role there, you can see there's now a hyperlink here that we can do this configuration from. There's also going to be a management here because this is a role that this server has. So now underneath your server manager, it now has a section here for DHCP. So we can go ahead and click this configure DHCP here. We're going to get a management pop-up here. And there are a couple of ways we can go through this. And I'm probably going to cancel out of here because I actually want to walk you through the management portion of it versus walking you through the wizard here. I want to walk you through a default setup. Okay. And so for this is going to be the username portion and these things here for the AD DNS here. And so for here, we're going to go ahead and say cancel out of here. And we can go ahead and say close here. And we're going to go over here to DHCP. This is going to open up there. So now this portion of the server manager is opened up. As time goes, you'll end up seeing things get populated in here like events and services, tells whether or not the service is running or not. You can stop and restart the service from here. Best practice analyzer. So if DHCP addresses are taking long to respond, to give those addresses out, you can come in here and start running a prefmon from within here. Okay, so we're going to go up here to the top. We're going to go up here to Tools, and we're going to go to DHCP and open up our management console. Let's go ahead and expand this out. Okay, so now that this is up here, you can see we have addresses here. We have two different areas. We have an IPv4 and an IPv6. And you can see there's let's make this a little bit bigger for us. You can see here there is a down arrow here, meaning that this service is not running, even though the service is running, but the scope itself isn't running. So we can come here and we can look at all tasks. We can see that this actually is running, but there's nothing for it to do. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and add us a scope in here. And so you can see here, we can, once we're done adding in a scope, we're going to come back up here and we're going to go through all of the options here. Okay. Go ahead and select new scope, select next. All right. And so now you're going to give the scope a name. So if you're doing your first scope, normally it's going to be for your AD environment. And so you can go ahead and type in your domain name here, or if you want to put the IP address range, in our case, we're going to be doing a scope for all four of the environments that we built throughout this course. Okay, so remember we had a Miami environment, we have a ATL environment, we have the test lab environment. So we're going to go ahead and type in our name of our scope here. In this case here, we're going to make it the IP address of our network. All right, and so that's going to be our scope, and we're going to call this default site. So we can click next here. Now it's going to ask us for our starting IP addresses and our ending IP addresses. Okay, so when we say starting IP addresses, these are going to be the IP addresses that we want to actually hand out. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to hand out our first IP address, because if you recall before, our server addresses are 10.10.10.5, 6, 7, and 8. So we don't want to hand anything out in there, because then we'd have to go back into the scope and then exclude those addresses. So what we would like to do is that if we know we have a set number of hosts, we'd want to assign that to the scope. So let's just say that we have 100 guests that are going to be on our network. So then we know we need 100 addresses. So the first thing we would do is we will go into here and we'll type in what our starting range is going to be. And so we know that's going to be 100. Our ending range, as we know, we have a Class C network because we have a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. So that's a Class C. So the most addresses we can have are 254 addresses. So what we're going to do is we only need 100 addresses. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to configure it to 200. All right, and so that's going to give us 100 addresses. So here it's going to be the length of time. And so here you can see, sorry, no, we haven't got to that part yet. So now we got to define the subnet for it. As I said before, we're on a Class C network. So we know that it's going to be 255, 255, 255. And you can see that our CIDR notation changed to 24. So from here, we're going to go ahead and click Next. And so if we have any exclusions that we need to make, we can go ahead and exclude those now. So if we would have started that range, if we would have started this at 2, for an example, all the way up through 200, inside of here, because we know we have 2 servers that are domain controllers that have an IP address of 10.10.10.5 and 10.10.6, we then would have to come in here and exclude those. So we would then exclude these addresses. We would add them into there and we would select next. Okay, so but in our case here, we're actually not doing that because we know better. We know that we're only going to start our addresses at 100. We only need 100 addresses. So that's what we're going to do there. All right, and so there's no need to add an exclusion here at all. All right, and so we're going to go ahead and select next. All right, and so this is going to be the lease duration. So users that are in the office, they're in the office for how many days a week. And so you can either use that as a rule of thumb, or you can say, I run a tight ship and I don't want to use days, I want to use hours. So you can say 8 hours a day. And so that just means that when users come in the morning, they're going to be waiting on your server to give them IP addresses. So if they start to work at 8 a.m., by the time they go home at 5, their addresses are going to be up. And at that point, the DHCP server will start releasing those addresses. Well, when they Control-Alt-Delete and go to log in the morning, it's ready to log on. It's going to then need new addresses. So normally you don't want to use that rule. Normally you want to always use days. So go ahead and set that to 8. Okay, so now that you've selected your scope lease time or your address lease time, you can go ahead and select next here. Okay, and so now when it's asked about the configuration items, do you want to configure those options now? You can go ahead and say yes, or you can say no and come back and configure those later. In this case here, we're going to go ahead and say no, because I actually want to show you how to configure those manually, because you're going to do those for some of the other ones, and there are going to be times where you have to come in and add to those options. So I want to actually show you how to do that. So I'm going to select no here, select next, and we're going to select finish. So now we can see here our scope is here. It is red. And so we can go ahead, come down to here and activate our scope. So I'm going to go ahead and say activate. And so now you can see there's no longer a red exclamation point on our scope. So now there are no scope options within here, but I will go down through here and I want to right click on each one of these and actually explain the properties within them. So for here, we can select our display statistics from within here, and this tells how many records are left. So you can see right now we have 101 records available in our pool. So we haven't had anyone connect to this pool yet. One is we wouldn't want to because we haven't put any options with it. So now we're going to hit close here. Right click on there again. We can go to the advanced, and right here we can go in here and do a split scope from within here. And this gives us the opportunity to split that scope into half, kind of like a 80-20 split is what this gives us an option to be able to do. So we're going to say cancel here. Another thing you can do with these scopes also is you can put them behind a load balancer. something like a F5 or a Barracuda, and you could assign 50 IP addresses to this server and 50 IP addresses to another one, and that'll give you high availability within your network. So that's something that a lot of admins will do. So if this server has to go down for a reboot, the other server can continue to hand out IP addresses, giving you that high availability. Okay. Next thing you can do is configure a failover within the environment. So this also gives you a high availability environment to where you can have 2 to 3 servers in a cluster together. We don't have a cluster environment set up here, but if we did, we could select this option and start adding servers to there. Okay. Reconcile just means that it goes through and does a cleanup of the records for you. All right, and then deactivate is how we take a scope offline. So we came in here and we activated it earlier, and this is how we deactivate it. So from here, we can come in here and select properties from here. We can then come in here and add more IP addresses if we needed to. We can change our lease duration if we need to. We can change our description if we wanted to as well. We can change our name again. That name will append up here. So if we wanted to change that name. And here within DNS, if you remember from our last lesson when we were going through doing DNS, we said that we can have the server hand out the IP addresses, and then we can have an authenticated server clean them up. And that's what happens here, is that we can have this server hand out the IP addresses, and we can also have it clean them up whenever their lease duration becomes dormant. So, okay, and that would be like if you would have chose another option of like 8 hours, then at that particular point, the DHCP server can go and clean the records up on the DHCP DNS server because it's authenticated. All right, and then this is what's called NAP is what they call it, but it's Network Access Protection. This is a feature that Microsoft put in for Cisco to where when computers come onto the network, you can force them into a separate VLAN to do updates and things of that nature. And so what they'll do is within that environment, they'll go ahead and get addresses and things to get out to Windows Update or get antivirus updates, things of that nature. And that's what this particular option here is for. Then you have your advanced option, and you can set your records for either boot P or DHCP or set them for both. All right, so your boot P is going to be booting from a PXE image. So whenever the computer goes to boot up, it has an option to boot from an image. Network switches and routers have this option as well. Normally, you'll come in here and you can select both. And when you configure your options for that particular scope, you can set an option for an image server on there that actually has those images with the IP address or URL, depending on how your developers have set that up. You can then direct those computers to there. And normally you'll do this if you're doing something like a terminal environment, something like a terminal server environment or a Citrix environment, where you're going to have headless computers, meaning they don't have hard drives in them. They just boot from the network. So normally you'll have this option for them. Okay. And once you do that, you get a boot P lease option here as well. And these options are normally leased a little bit longer because, again, these are going to be items with no hard drives in them at all. So they really depend on being connected to the network a longer period of time, because normally they're going to stay on a lot longer because they're not going to be rebooting because they're just running an image on the network. Okay. And here's the delay on the configuration. Normally you want to set that for 0 because again, these are going to be devices that are booting from the network. So in this option, we'll go ahead and keep the default and keep it at our DHCP here. Okay. Okay, now that we went through that portion here, let's go down through the rest of the scope here. We're going to select the address pool. From within the address pool, we can right click and we can come in here and do our exclusions again, just like we talked about before. So from here, we can come in here and type the IP addresses in the pool. So if we know we don't want to give out our last 2 addresses within there, we can go ahead and type those in here. Let's just call it 199, and we're going to do 200 as well. All right, and so now we're not going to hand out these last addresses. So you can see here, these have been excluded from the range. They have an X through them. If we want to delete that, we can come back in here and we can delete that. Okay. we can come down here to our reservation. Reservation is going to be if we have something like a printer on the network and we're going to get the MAC address and everything from the vendor. They're going to bring the printer in, and when they plug it up, you want that printer to go ahead and get an address. So from within here, you can go ahead and select new reservation, and that manufacturer is going to give you the name of the printer. So if you want to type a name in here or whatever naming convention you use for your network, then the MAC address, this is going to be the burned in address, and then you can give it a description. This could be a, whatever the name of that printer is that you're going to, name it. You can put that into here, and it can be for both. Okay, and that's how you're going to add that. And to get that MAC address, if it was for a computer or something, we'll bring that up and I'll actually show you what that looks like. So for that, we're going to do an ipconfig/all. Sorry about that. All right, and so you can see from within here, here's our physical address. So this is going to be the MAC address here. Same thing here, IPv4. And you can see there's our MAC address as well for that, okay, right here. And so the manufacturer will give you an address like this, and so you'll enter that in, and I'll actually give you an example of that. I'm just going to highlight this and copy it, and I'm just going to paste it into here. All right, and so you'll put the MAC address in there like that. And then from there, you'll go ahead and let's go ahead and just type something in here. And then we can give it a name, and we're going to call this, we'll call this server 05. And we're going to go ahead and say add. And so now when we click close here, we can see here, here's server 05 here. And so from within this this particular reservation list, we can delete that. We can extend this here and come down here to this particular reservation here, and we can configure options for it. And the reason we can do that from here would be, that if we had other options from within here, which we haven't went over these scope options yet, but we had other items within here we wanted to assign to this particular device. Okay, so this one, go ahead and hit cancel now. And we're going to go right here to the scope options. So this was the reason that I wanted to come through here and actually do this manually, because I wanted to actually show you these scope options. I'm going to right click here and configure these options now. So you'll do this for every scope that you're going to configure. And yeah, again, there's so many items here. You wouldn't want to do this in a wizard. You want to actually come through, because there's a lot of these items within here you're not going to use. I'll point out kind of some of the key ones that you're going to do. One is going to be the router. That's going to be your default gateway. And you can kind of scroll over there if you want to get a description of this. Box isn't very big, so you kind of want to familiarize yourself with the items that you're going to be assigning to the scope. So for here, you can either put the server name in, or you can put the IP address. And the reason for putting the server name in, if there was a server on the network that you could resolve that actually had that, you could put it in there. But normally you're going to type in the IP address here. And in our case here, we know that our default gateway is 10.10.10.1. We can go ahead and add that in, select apply, and you can see here it showed up here. We'll come back in here. Normally you want to go ahead and configure all of your options while you're in here. And you can say your time server, so where your computer is going to get their time from. Well, we know that that's our domain controller. That's going to be our main time source, because everything that authenticates to the network needs to be in a time sync. Microsoft servers really depend on that. So you want everything to stay in sync. So you know that that's going to be your domain controller. So that will be this. Your next option will be your DNS server. So you know that you have two DNS servers on your network. So you know that we have two areas within our network adapter where we can configure those addresses. So you're going to type those in here as well. And so we know that that's 10.10.10.5, and we know the other one is 10.10.6. All right, and so we know that. And so now we can move these around if we wanted to. If we wanted to say, oh, you know what, I meant to type that one in first, we can move these up and down so when they get assigned to the particular computers. Okay, and then we can come down here. We can see again, here's another one here for the for other DNS servers here. There are going to be other ones here for name servers. Same thing here for the name servers. We can do the same thing here. All right, we can go ahead and add those guys into here. It's just waiting. Takes a few moments for that to do it. And we'll do the same thing for that server. Sorry about the fat fingering there. All right, we're going to add that one into there. You're going to see that come up as well. All right, so So it's added both of those into here now. And so we can come down here, we can see some other things within here. We have log servers, cookie servers. It's going to be for web servers, for cookies. So you guys have heard of those before. You have your host name in here, and that's going to be a particular host name on the network. You can come down here to your DNS host name. This is going to be important. Remember that DNS suffix we talked about before? And so this will be where you would supply that particular name here. So in our case here, this is going to be our test lab 1. All right, so we know that that's the name of our domain here. So it's testlab1.local. And then we can come down here a little bit more and look at some of the other options here. We can see here we have swap servers, we have root path, we have quite a few other options within here. Okay, now that you have the domain name entered into this particular option here, this should be enough to get you going. Again, you can continue to go through these options here as you need to. The MTUs and those things are all going to be for like your network devices and things that are going to need an address. You can go ahead and select the Advanced tab here, and you can see your options here. But in the vendor class here, this is important here. So you can see here it's got Microsoft option, 2000 options from within here. And if you're working with something like an older router, you might have to select this option here. Majority of the time, though, this DHCP standard option normally will work for you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and select OK here. So now you can see here within this middle pane here, you can see we have our options here selected here that we configured, and these are going to be ready to go. So we can come down here to policy, so we can tie a policy to this scope as well by selecting new policy, typing in the name here, and this policy is going to pertain to, like it says here, network time protocols and things of that nature. Okay, so you can do that, and this is going to be for, as it says here, for your VoIP phones. All right, we can go ahead and hit cancel for that since we don't have those. So now you can see here our scope is almost ready to start handing out addresses, but if you look here at the top, you can see that our IPv4 is still red. Well, the reason why this is red, and it's actually going to tell you over here in this window here, you need to authorize this server to participate as a DHCP server. If we would have finished the wizard up earlier, it would have actually went on and authenticated this server for us. So now we can come up here to action and come down to where we actually need to turn that particular server on. So we're going to select our server here, click on actions, and we're going to go ahead and authorize this server. And we'll give that a few minutes to come on here. Okay, now you can see we have green up here at the top now, meaning that our server has been authorized, and so our scopes are ready to go. So now over on my test computer, I'm going to go ahead and turn one of those on, and we're going to actually look at our address pool, and we're actually going to see if we see anything happen with our address leases over here, and see if, oh, well, it's this is the one that we did a lease for already. This is one of the ones that we typed in that we want to do the reservation for. As you can see here, it shows up in here and it actually says the reservation is inactive. Well, that's going to be because the this was a bogus address that we put in here. This is the one of this server here. Of course, we really can't do that. And it's going to say for the network access protection, it says it has full access to the network. But once we add once we restart our test box over there, it's going to reach out to this DHCP server to get an address, and we should see an address show up in here in just a few moments. Okay, we can see over here on my test computer here, I've turned it on, server's rebooted, and you can see here now, I've also went on and ran an ipconfig/renew to renew the address. And you can see here, it reached out to the server and got an IP address. We got one out of our range here, and it's asking us, do we want to discover other servers on the network? For right now, I'm going to say no. But here's what I wanted to point out from within here, was I wanted to do an all to actually show you the details from within here. You can see here, it reached out to our DHCP server. Here's the IP address of our DHCP server. Here's the default gateway that we configured. This is going to be the DNS stuff that we configured from within there. Here's our DNS servers here. And if we come up here a little bit more, you can see here, here's our DNS suffix. Remember, we supplied this as well. So now when it goes to try to ping something off the network, on the network, it's going to then use this address first. So I'm going to right click here on this network adapter, choose Open Network and Sharing Center, and then from there, I'm then going to click on the network adapter here, and I'm going to go to Details here. So you're going to see the same information from within here as well. I'm going to go ahead and select Close and select Property from here. And go ahead and go to IPv4 here. And you can see here, everything's still grayed out from within here, meaning that we got our IP address from our DHCP server. And so from within here, we can come into here and test connectivity. We already know that it's working because one is that we got an IP address from our DHCP server, but we're going to go ahead and ping one of the servers on the network. So we're getting a response back from that server telling us that we have connectivity. Okay, we're going to go back over to our DHCP server and check our scope. Okay, back over here on our DHCP server, we're going to go ahead and click on our lease here. We're going to refresh this. And now you can see here, here's the server that has a lease in here and has its lease when this lease will actually expire. You can see here, it's going to expire on 10/1. And so if we come up here to our particular scope here, we can right click on it and we're going to display our statistics about this. And it tells us we have two addresses in use. One is the reservation that we did. The other one was the dynamic one. And tells us we have 99 addresses free and available, I should say. And we've only used, we've got 98% free. Okay. All right. And so you would do the same thing for the rest of your scopes. You would actually come up here to the server, right click, and add a new scope into here. Sorry, on your IPv4, and add a new scope into here, and so on and so forth. So for all of the other networks, so 10.20, 10.30, 10.40, you add those into here with the same options that they need for their gateways, so on and so forth. And then those will then be ready to hand out their addresses. There's no need to do anything else as far as authorizing the server. The server itself has been authorized to operate within this particular domain. And so the only thing you'll have to do at that point is turn the particular scope on, and that's all you'll end up having to do there. Okay. All right. Well, I hope this has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. And again, if you have any questions about anything, please leave me a comment. I'll be sure to respond back. Hope you have a good day. Thank you.